In the annals of Wall Street history, few names carry as much weight or as much tragedy as Jesse Livermore. Known as the Boy Plunger and later the Great Bear of Wall Street, Livermore was a man who made and lost multiple fortunes during his lifetime. His story isn't just about the spectacular wins that made him legendary, it's about the devastating losses that broke him, and more importantly, about the remarkable resilience that allowed him to rebuild from absolute zero, not once, but multiple times. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most compelling aspects of Livermore's life, how he started over after losing everything. This isn't a fairy tale with a perfect happy ending. It's a raw, honest look at what it takes to rebuild when you've hit rock bottom, when your name is associated with failure, and when every rational voice tells you to quit. Before we explore his comebacks, let's understand who Jesse Livermore was. Born in 1877 inches rural Massachusetts, Livermore ran away from his farming family at age 14 with just $5 in his pocket. He started as a board boy at a brokerage firm, posting stock prices on a chalkboard, but young Jesse had an extraordinary gift. He could see patterns in the numbers that others missed. By age 15, he had made his first trade and won. By 20, he had turned that initial success into thousands of dollars trading in bucket shops, sketchy establishments, where people bet on stock price movements without actually owning the stocks. Livermore became so successful that bucket shops across New England banned him. He had no choice but to move to the big leagues, Wall Street. But here's what makes Livermore's story so instructive. His genius didn't protect him from catastrophic failure. In fact, it might have made his falls even harder. Livermore's first major bankruptcy came after his legendary short position during the Panic of 1907. Wait, how could he go bankrupt after one of his greatest trades? That's the cruel irony of his story. In 1906 and 1907, Livermore correctly predicted the market crash. He shorted stocks aggressively and made over $1 million, equivalent to about $30 million today. J.P. Morgan himself allegedly sent a messenger to Livermore asking him to stop shorting the market because his trades were making the panic worse. Livermore complied, covering his shorts at Morgan's request, demonstrating both his market power and his sense of responsibility. But success planted the seeds of his destruction. After the panic, Livermore grew overconfident. He started taking larger positions with less analysis. He ignored his own rules about waiting for the right moment. Within months, he had lost everything, not just his million-dollar fortune, but he was actually in debt for over $70,000, an astronomical sum in 1907. At 30 years old, Jesse Livermore was bankrupt. His creditors were circling, his reputation was tarnished. Most men would have walked away, found a regular job, and faded into obscurity. What does it take to start over after losing everything? Livermore's response reveals crucial insights into the psychology of resilience. First, he refused to see failure as final. In his mind, bankruptcy wasn't an identity, it was a temporary condition. This distinction is critical. When you lose everything, the greatest danger isn't the empty bank account. It's the story you tell yourself about what that empty account means about you as a person. Livermore could have told himself he was a fraud who got lucky once and then revealed his true incompetence. Instead, he told himself he was a skilled trader who had made mistakes but still possessed valuable knowledge and abilities. Second, he took radical responsibility. He didn't blame the market, bad luck, or other traders. He analyzed his losses with surgical precision, identifying exactly where he had deviated from his proven methods. This honest self-assessment was painful but necessary. You can't fix problems you won't acknowledge. Third, he maintained his self-respect while showing humility. This balance is delicate. Livermore needed to believe in his abilities enough to try again, but he also needed to acknowledge his mistakes and learn from them. Too much confidence would lead to repeating the same errors. Too little would prevent him from taking necessary risks. So how did Livermore actually execute his comeback? He employed a strategy that's as relevant today as it was in 1907. Step 1. He negotiated with his creditors. Instead of declaring formal bankruptcy and walking away from his debts, Livermore made a gentleman's agreement. He would pay back every dollar he owed, but he needed time and freedom to trade. His creditors agreed, primarily because they believed in his talent and knew they'd get nothing if he gave up trading entirely. This decision had profound psychological effects. By committing to repay his debts, Livermore maintained his integrity and self-respect. He wasn't running from his mistakes, he was facing them head-on. This gave him the moral authority to ask for help and to believe in himself. Step 2. He borrowed a small amount of trading capital, just $500, from a brokerage friend who believed in his abilities. This wasn't charity, it was an investment. The friend saw value in Livermore's skills and was willing to bet on his comeback. Here's a crucial lesson. Starting over doesn't mean starting completely alone. Livermore leveraged his relationships and reputation, the one asset that survived his bankruptcy. He had built trust during his earlier successes, and that trust gave people reason to support his comeback. Step 3. He returned to basics. Livermore didn't try to make spectacular trades to quickly recover his losses. Instead, he went back to the fundamental principles that had made him successful initially. He traded smaller positions, he waited for clear signals, he followed his rules religiously, even when his emotions screamed at him to take shortcuts. This discipline was extraordinary considering the pressure he faced. He owed massive debts. He had a reputation to restore. The temptation to make big, risky bets must have been intense. But Livermore understood that desperate trading is losing trading. Step 4. He compounded slowly. Starting with that $500, Livermore methodically built his stake. He would make a profitable trade, take his profit, and reinvest it carefully. There were no home runs at first, just consistent singles and doubles. Within a few years, through careful trading and unwavering discipline, Livermore had not only recovered, but had paid back every creditor in full. His integrity was restored, his confidence was rebuilt, and he had proven that his success wasn't just luck. But Livermore's story doesn't end there. In fact, his pattern of boom and bust would continue throughout his life, each cycle teaching new lessons about resilience and human psychology. By 1914, Livermore had rebuilt his fortune to over $500,000. Then came World War I. When the war broke out in Europe, stock markets were in chaos. Livermore went heavily long on the U.S. market, betting on American prosperity from the war. He was right about the direction, but his timing was catastrophically wrong. The losses mounted quickly. Once again, Livermore found himself broke, not just broke, but over $1 million in debt. This time, the fall was even harder because he had climbed so high. He was in his late 30s, with a wife and child to support. The comeback from 1907 now looked like a fluke. The whispers on Wall Street suggested that Livermore had lost his touch, that he was finished. The psychological toll of a second bankruptcy is different from the first. The first time, you can tell yourself it was a learning experience. The second time, it starts to feel like a pattern, like evidence of a fundamental flaw. For many people, this is where the comeback story ends. But Livermore wasn't most people. He employed the same basic strategy: honest self-assessment, negotiation with creditors, starting with small capital, and disciplined trading. But this time, he added something new. He developed an even more rigorous trading system. During his period of losses, Livermore had been trading on hunches and feelings rather than his systematic approach. Now, he formalized his methods into a strict set of rules. He created what we might today call a trading journal, meticulously recording every trade, the reasoning behind it, and the outcome. He was turning trading from an art into a science, or rather, into a disciplined practice that combined both art and science. He also made peace with smaller wins. Previously, Livermore had always swung for the fences, trying to make millions on single trades. Now, he focused on consistency. He understood that wealth isn't built in a day, but it can be destroyed in one. By 1917, Livermore had completely recovered. By 1929, he had positioned himself perfectly for the great crash, shorting the market at its peak. In a single day, the 29th of October, 1929, Black Tuesday, Livermore made approximately $100 million, equivalent to nearly $1.5 billion today. He was called the Great Bear of Wall Street, for profiting from the crash that devastated millions. This was his greatest triumph, the vindication of all his comebacks, the proof that his methods worked and his resilience was justified. Sadly, Livermore's story doesn't have a happy ending. Despite his incredible comeback abilities, he lost his fortune again in the 1,930 seconds. The market had fundamentally changed after the crash, with new regulations and different dynamics. Livermore, now in his 60s, couldn't adapt as he once had. The psychological toll of decades of extreme stress, coupled with personal problems, proved too much. In 1940, Jesse Livermore took his own life. His suicide note read in part, "My life has been a failure." This tragic end adds a somber dimension to his comeback story. It reminds us that financial success isn't everything, that you can win every battle and still lose the war if you neglect your mental health and personal relationships. But there's still tremendous value in studying Livermore's comebacks. His ability to rebuild multiple times from complete ruin demonstrates principles that apply far beyond trading. Accept responsibility without self-destruction. Livermore acknowledged his mistakes but never let them define his identity. He separated his failures from his self-worth enough to keep trying. Return to fundamentals under pressure. When things fell apart, Livermore didn't look for complex new solutions. He went back to the basics that had worked before, executing them with renewed discipline. Leverage your reputation and relationships. Even broke, Livermore had assets, his knowledge, his past successes, and the trust he'd built with others. He used these intangible assets to create opportunities for comebacks, compound small wins. The spectacular fortunes came later. The comeback started with small, careful steps that built momentum over time. Develop systems, not just instincts. After each failure, Livermore made his approach more systematic, reducing reliance on emotion and increasing dependence on proven processes. Know when adaptation is needed. Livermore's final failure came partly because he couldn't adapt to a fundamentally changed market. Resilience isn't just about doing the same thing harder. Sometimes it requires recognizing when circumstances have changed enough to demand new approaches. Jesse Livermore's story is ultimately about the human capacity for resilience in the face of devastating setbacks. Yes, he failed in the end, but his multiple comebacks demonstrate that starting over is possible even when circumstances seem hopeless. Most of us will never face the extreme boom and bust cycles that defined Livermore's life, but we all face setbacks, business failures, career disasters, personal defeats. In those moments, Livermore's comebacks offer a roadmap. Take responsibility, return to fundamentals, leverage your true assets, start small, stay disciplined, and never confuse a temporary defeat with permanent failure. The market that Livermore traded in no longer exists. The regulations, technology, and dynamics have all changed, but human psychology remains remarkably constant. The fear, after losing everything, the temptation to take desperate risks, the need to believe in yourself while remaining humble, these are universal challenges. Jesse Livermore started over after losing everything because he understood something essential. You're never truly finished until you stop trying. He may have made and lost multiple fortunes, and his life may have ended tragically, but between those bankruptcies and that final defeat were remarkable demonstrations of human resilience, strategic thinking, and sheer determination. The question his story poses to each of us is simple but profound. When you hit bottom, will you stay there, or will you find a way to start climbing again? Livermore's comebacks prove that the climb is possible. His tragic end reminds us to measure success in more than just money and to take care of ourselves in the process. In the end, Jesse Livermore's greatest legacy might not be his trading techniques or his spectacular fortunes. It might be his example of how to face total failure and choose to try again not just once, but as many times as it takes. That's a lesson that transcends Wall Street and speaks to anyone who's ever had to start over from scratch. If you found this story valuable and want to learn more about the lessons from history's greatest traders and entrepreneurs, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our next deep dive into the stories that can transform how you think about success, failure, and resilience. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.